Hello everyone! Today I am excited to share with you some more powerful flat earth evidence. If you think the information presented in this video is as important as I do, please share this video with others, that's all I ask. This evidence comes from a veteran F-15E Weapons Systems Officer, WSO, which is commonly referred to as a WISO, who was the backseater in an F-15E Strike Eagle. If you've seen the old movie Top Gun, the character Goose was a Radar Intercept Officer, or RIO, which was the Navy's version of a WISO. The WISO essentially manages the weapon system and navigation of the aircraft. In short, I had a Zoom meeting with a veteran F-15 WISO and Cujo, a veteran and retired F-16 pilot, and YouTuber Run Boston Bear. Yes, all four of us are flat earthers, which is always awesome. A big thanks to both Run Boston Bear for his help in facilitating the discussion, and Cujo for adding his fighter pilot expertise. I wish I could share the entire conversation, but the F-15 WISO wisely prefers to remain anonymous. So we're going to refer to him as WISO, and I will have to black out his image, which will be annoying for everyone. Unfortunately, the Globe Zealots would do everything to hurt WISO's career for revealing this information, and we're not going to let that happen. But the great thing about this information, it can be tested by any weapons systems officer and fighter pilots. In fact, we encourage and hope others will share their expertise, because this certainly proves a flat earth. The information provided by WISO builds on the information previously provided from Cujo. In case you are unaware of his interview with Globebusters, Cujo, or Mike, is a retired F-16 veteran pilot and a terrific guy. When he was an F-16 fighter pilot, Cujo would often fly with a wingman or maybe 3 other F-16s in formation. Each pilot, using his radar system, would then have the responsibility to sweep a key section or block of the sky based on the F-16's position. This was for maximum efficiency. For example, if there were 2 F-16s in formation, one would sweep a lower section of the sky, and the other F-16 would sweep a higher section of the sky. When there were 4 F-16s in formation, the aircraft would sweep an angled section of the sky, like 60 degrees up, 60 degrees down, 60 degrees to the left, or 60 degrees to the right. So, if there were 4 F-16s in formation, an aircraft on the right would maybe have the duty to sweep his radar looking for aircraft at 10,000 feet and above on the right side. That would be his block. Here is the problem for the Globe. These F-16s are sweeping their radar out to 80 nautical miles, or 92 statute miles, out while examining a certain section or block of the sky. If the Globe were real, at 92 miles, an enemy jet that is actually flying at 10,000 feet would instead appear to be at 4,357 feet from the position of Cujo's F-16. That's because the curvature drop for 92 miles is around 5,643 feet. 92 times 8 inches divided by 12 equals 5,643 feet. Regardless of what direction the opposing aircraft was located, the other jet would necessarily appear 5,643 feet, or 2/3 of a degree lower than its actual altitude if the Globe were real. I made this simple diagram to help you understand what we are talking about. Cujo's F-16 is at the top of the alleged Globe, and you can see the smaller aircraft to the right that we're going to assume is far away. At a distance of 92 miles, even though it's at the same altitude on the Globe, that jet would appear to be 5,643 feet, or 2/3 of a degree lower than Cujo's jet. Even at 40 nautical miles, which is 46 statute miles, an opposing aircraft would appear about 1,411 feet lower from Cujo's F-16. The distant enemy aircraft would have to always appear lower than its true altitude. No enemy aircraft ever climbed over the Globe, causing a change between the F-16 radar observation blocks. This was radar coming from the F-16, not the ground, and the radar was always direct line of sight. If the Globe were real, every engagement would result in the opposing aircraft appearing to rapidly climb thousands of feet from the perspective of the pilot, even though the opposing aircraft is flying straight and level. Except for those times when an opponent was truly climbing, this never happened. Globe climbing does not exist. And this would have been extremely dangerous for all pilots in the engagement, especially when they're traveling up to a combined 1,800 miles per hour. That is 30 miles a minute between two aircraft. And so in just 3 minutes, the opposing jet would have appeared to have climbed 5,400 feet on a globe. That's insane. As confirmed by Cujo, the F-16's radar system was based on a flat and stationary Earth. Just think about it. How could you lock, track, and acquire multiple enemy aircraft when supposed Earth curvature adjustments and Earth spin would throw the whole matter into disarray? That would be a nightmare for any pilot. But let's get back to our F-15 Wizzo. The first thing Wizzo did was confirm Cujo's statements regarding the impossibility of the radar system on a fighter jet working for a globe, but in this case for the F-15 Eagle. These radar sweeps were direct line of sight. No opposing aircraft ever apparently climbed thousands of feet over a globe in a few minutes. It never happened. But Wizzo had a few more flat Earth proofs to add, but these relate to the Sniper Advanced Targeting Pod on the F-15E Strike Eagle. You can read more about the Sniper Pod here. The Sniper Targeting Pod was separate from the jet's radar and included a high-resolution infrared camera and HD TV that could target and track objects on the ground and in the air. According to Wikipedia, its image processing allows air crews to detect, identify, and engage tactical-sized targets outside the range of most enemy air defenses, giving it a crucial role in the destruction of enemy air defense missions. The pod incorporates a high-definition, mid-wave FLIR, dual-mode laser, visible light, HD TV, laser spot tracker, laser marker, video data link, and a digital data recorder. Advanced sensors and image processing, incorporating image stabilization, enable targets to be identified at ranges which minimize exposure to defensive enemy systems. Here are a couple short video clips describing the Sniper Targeting Pod.
In fact, you can take a look out here. That's a wide. That's what it looks like normally with no magnification, is how far we're away.
Okay.
There's an arrow.
Yeah. 11 miles, roughly. Yeah.
We could zoom. We're 10 miles away. See if I can get a TV of it.
Jeez.
No, that is
the tail number,
a normal TV picture of it.
Yeah.
Rock steady stabilization and enhanced state-of-the-art image clarity permit real-time geolocation, single-pass target identification, multi-targeting, laser spot tracking, and accurate bomb damage assessment.
Boy, that picture is just awesome.
Precise targeting capabilities allow air crews to automatically track and identify high-speed targets with exceptional tracking tenacity.
This Sniper Targeting Pod would also provide the angle to the target with respect to the F-15. The distance to the target was provided by the TSD moving map that Wizzo would cue his targeting pod to, and that is where it gets interesting for the flat Earth. First, when Wizzo was stationed in Afghanistan, F-15s would have to spend long periods of time up in the air to be ready for action. One time, on a beautiful, clear, and cold day, and just for the fun of it, Wizzo found K2 on the TSD moving map and placed a mark point on top of it to cue the Sniper Targeting Pod. The jet calculated the distance from the F-15 to the mark point, and it was at a distance of 300 nautical miles, which is 345 statute miles. The top of K2 has an elevation of 28,251 feet. Wizzo was also flying at 28,000 feet. Here's a picture showing an example of the clear conditions that he also witnessed. If we lived on a globe, due to the 15,000-foot mountains 193 miles away from Wizzo's F-15, K2 should have been impossible to see from his altitude at 28,000 feet, as shown in these diagrams. I have to thank YouTuber B Flat for confirming this on AutoCAD, and I will have a link to his channel in the description. As confirmed by AutoCAD from Wizzo's F-15 observation point, the top of K2 should have been impossible to see at 11,489 feet below the line of sight from the top of that closer 15,000-foot mountain range. The AutoCAD diagram was made to exact scale. In addition to the fact that K2 should have been impossible to see under the globe, the targeting pod indicated that the top of K2 was at 0 degrees elevation with respect to the F-15. In other words, the targeting pod recognized that K2 was at an equal elevation as the F-15. In fact, K2 should have appeared 2.5 degrees downward if we lived on a globe.
So, I went, and I found K2 on the moving map, and then I dropped a mark point on it. Then I cued the targeting pod to the mark point. The pod cues to it in both azimuth and elevation. The pod cued right to K2, and I can see within the half a degree wide field of view, which is like looking through a soda straw at 300 nautical miles. And you could tell that was K2 because you'd seen pictures of K2, and K2 was so much higher than everything else around it. And my pod showed a 0 degree elevation angle to the top of the mountain. A half a degree at 300 nautical miles has close to a 2.5 nautical mile field of view total. And basically looking at the whole peak, zoomed in at 300 nautical miles. But the key is that I am at 28,000 feet. The top of that mountain is at 28,000 feet, and the targeting pod was saying 0 elevation angle, meaning 0 look down and 0 up, just like I was looking at it at 10 nautical miles. But I am at 300 nautical miles, and it is level. It's perfect.
Oh, I get where you're going now. Okay, so you're saying it's at 0 degrees. I thought you were saying 0 altitude, but yeah, so it's at your level. That's odd. That's right there is a freaking flow killer for sure.
But Wizzo's flat Earth proofs didn't end there. The targeting pod was used to view other aircraft that were showing up on the radar system. Under the globe model, at a distance of 80 nautical miles, which is 92 statute miles again, assuming that both Wizzo's F-15 and the enemy aircraft were at the same true altitude, the enemy aircraft would necessarily have to appear at a lower angle due to the alleged globe curvature drop. Instead, the targeting pod would indicate the enemy aircraft was at the same or 0 degrees angle as the F-15, and the targeting pod would then track the enemy aircraft. Here's a short clip from our discussion.
We didn't do 80-mile sets. It was just too far. But we did do in excess of 40 often. And, you know, when you get a lock way out there, and when you get a lock, a little TD box, target designator box, comes up in the HUD, so you can see through that box is the guy you're looking at. Yeah, the TD box over on the right-hand side right there. So if he's 2,000 feet different at 40 miles, he's going to appear to be in your block, potentially. So, never happen. I mean, you're not out there going, that dude's in my block. No, you know that he's in either. We always did altitude blocks because for deconfliction prior to the merge, prior to getting visual with everybody, with all the players, you had to have deconfliction. So we called them red air blocks and blue air blocks because somebody's always the good guy and somebody's always the bad guy, and we're trying to kill each other, right? Ancestors in the F-15 and I used to do this all the time, right? Where, and you set the blocks up, 0s to 4s and 5s to 9s. And look at that, he had already written that before I said that. So you can tell there's another legit thing right there. Anyway, because that gives us 1,000 foot of altitude separation between all the jets. If we're in our block and they're in their block, then we're not going to hit each other if we never see each other, right? So once you get situational awareness, then you can go down in their block. Well, if I'm red air over here in the 0s to 4s, and these guys are in 5s to 9s, and they're 40 miles away, they're going to appear. They could potentially appear to be in my block when I look through the TD box at them. That doesn't happen. I mean, there's a knock it off call, and the fight resets if you're not in your blocks. That's sacrosanct. Blocks were there to keep us from killing each other for real, right?
Yeah, you have a flight lead and a wingman. So number 1 and number 2, you have 2 different pieces of the sky where you look up and down and you slightly overlap, right? So in this case, number 1 is looking up and number 2 is looking down, but you are overlapped right here at a certain range, and that is where you set your radar coverage. If I was the low looker, and I knew that there was a guy at 80 nautical miles and above my altitude coverage, for instance, if coverage goes to 1,000 feet above my altitude at 40 nautical miles, I know that my coverage will be 2,000 feet above my altitude at 80. I'd always did the math, it was really easy, but under the globe, it's not supposed to be 2,000 feet above at 80 nautical miles. It should be around 4,000 feet above my altitude. It really should be 1,500 feet higher than what the radar is saying. So, in this situation, I am at 27,000 feet. I put my coverage to look 28,000 feet and down at 40 nautical miles. The top of the coverage was 29,000 feet at 80 nautical miles. If there was a guy at 30,000 feet at 80 nautical miles, I knew that I had to look above my coverage to find him. But guess what? On the globe, if I set my coverage at 28,000 feet and down at 40 nautical miles, the top of the coverage at 80 nautical miles should be nearly 31,000 feet, and my radar should have seen him, but it never did. Those radar coverages are all linear, because it is calculating it off of a flat plane.
And radar beams don't do this. Radar beams go straight. Totally makes a difference on when you're going to turn and drag out of the fight or press.
Just like the radar sweeps that Cujo talked about, the targeting pod never showed incoming aircraft climbing over a globe. If the enemy aircraft was higher than the F-15, the elevation angle in the pod would increase as they flew closer. If an enemy aircraft was lower, the angle would continually decrease. Never once would an enemy aircraft go from looking down at it with the targeting pod to looking up at it, unless it was actually climbing. Remember, at 80 nautical miles or 92 statute miles, that's a difference of 5,643 feet. This would be very dangerous for pilots, as not to run into incoming aircraft, and it was also vital information for engaging or evading enemy aircraft. Of course, the globe propagandists would potentially claim that refraction caused the opposing jet to hop over the curvature and appear at 0 degrees elevation. But the claim would be impossible because the targeting pod would follow the incoming aircraft at 92 miles away in both IR and TV modes without any altitude adjustment. In fact, if there was a difference between the targeting pod and the radar cueing, or differences between the TV and infrared picture, they had to specifically report those differences. Finally, WISO would also use the air-to-ground raw return radar to find embedded thunderstorms up to 92 miles away by placing the very bottom of the radar beam on their horizontal altitude. If, for example, they were flying at 24,000 feet, he would look for only the storms that reached above 24,000 feet. WISO would plan the course of the pilot to fly above, below, or to the side of these storms. A curvature drop of 5,643 feet would have dropped the thunderstorm below the radar coverage. This would have been huge for planning routes and avoiding these storms. Distant storms never climbed over an alleged curvature. Here is WISO describing the matter.
The tops of your storms would show up like this. This is from the stadium view looking at the side. You know we are flying this way. This is from the top down, blimp footage here, and then you would go and you mark these storms. I would set the bottom of the radar coverage on my altitude and look from there and up. I would mark all the storms I would see popping into our altitude. Would find the storms, mark a storm here, and mark a storm there, and I would mark them all. And then owner situational display, and on our TSD, these mark points would show up on our routes so we could avoid them. Does that make sense? But I knew that at 60 nautical miles, if I marked that storm cell, it was at or above my altitude. But if I were on a globe, I could be missing storms out at range, because it could be over 3,000 feet below my coverage at 60 nautical miles. Those storms would have never shown up on my radar until we got closer to them. And if the storms popped up closer, we might not be able to avoid them.
We used to do the same thing, only we didn't have all your situational display and all that stuff, but you could roll up and see, like embedded thunderstorms where you couldn't, okay, there's one above me right there. But I never even thought about it in that way. Just the same thing though, you put your cursors, if you're at 24,000 feet and you put your bottom altitude on the cursor about the radar coverage, you put that on 24,000 feet and run it all the way out the scope, it's going to stay on 24,000 feet. The radar ain't doing that. It ain't doing that. It's staying flat out there. So at 80 miles, I don't know what the number is, but there's a hell of a lot of space underneath 24,000 feet.
In conclusion, think of the complexity of a computer system that would have to calculate for the alleged curvature of the Earth and the alleged spin of the Earth, while aircraft are intercepting at, say, 900 miles per hour. That's a combined speed of 1,800 miles per hour. Every angle, every direction, every maneuver, every bank, whether the jets are flying with the Earth's rotation or against it, everything would require immediate radar and camera adjustments. And that's just simply impossible. Furthermore, these computers would go down, and the pilots would have to know how to make these adjustments without the help of an alleged master supercomputer. In short, both the radar systems and the targeting pod can only work on a flat Earth. There is no other conclusion. I hope this video was understandable because these proofs end the globe to any reasonable thinking and objective person. We further challenge all Wizzos and fighter pilots to confirm the claims in this video because the arguments are true. If you are a genuine truth seeker and would like to share your experiences, please send me an email at tabooconspiracy@protonmail.com, and I will keep your information confidential. Thanks for watching.
That's right there is a freaking globe killer for sure.